In today's video, I am going to share with you my labor experience. My labor experience was very positive, thank goodness. But before starting this video, I just want to remind you that each labor experience is totally unique. And that makes sense because each mother is a mother, each baby is a different baby, each doctor is a different doctor, each hospital is a different hospital. So everything that I'm going to describe in this video is my unique experience. So no comparisons. During pregnancy, and especially during labor, things may or may not go as planned. There may be a lot of surprises throughout the way. But one of the things that I knew for sure is that my OBG would not allow me to have my baby after 39 weeks. And my OBG, she explained everything to me since the beginning of my pregnancy, but because when I was gonna give birth, I would be above 35 years old, it's considered as a high-risk pregnancy. Not only high-risk pregnancy, but also what the doctors used to call geriatric pregnancy. This term of geriatric pregnancy nowadays is a little outdated, and it has been replaced by advanced maternal age. That does sound a lot better. So my OBG told me, if you do not start to go into labor naturally up to 39 weeks, we are going to have an induced labor for you because you cannot pass 39 weeks. So that's it. That would be the end of the road for me. I just want to say that in these high-risk pregnancies or geriatric pregnancies, even though there is a higher chance of complications, in the majority of the cases, like in my case, everything is gonna be all right and there is gonna be absolutely no problem, neither for the mother and nor for the baby. I know it's very common to refer to pregnancies as a 9-month event, but for doctors, they prefer to use the terms calculated into weeks instead of months, because that makes everything more accurate for them. Because months can vary in the amount of days. There are some months who have 28 days, 30 or 31, so they prefer to calculate that into weeks. So the whole pregnancy is 40 weeks. And according to my conversation with my OBG, I would not pass 39 weeks, just for safety because of the geriatric pregnancy. So I finally reached 39 weeks, and guess what? Where was the baby? Did my water break? No. Did the contractions start? No. Was I entering into labor? So during my last OBG appointment with my doctor, she told me that she was going to schedule an induced labor for me and let me know the day and the time to go to the hospital. Now let's talk about the hospital. The hospital that I picked to have my baby, I picked that hospital specifically because it is the second largest hospital in terms of number of births here in the United States. It only loses to one hospital in Atlanta called Northside Hospital, I think, in Georgia. And also because this hospital is the most prepared to deal with any sorts of complications, either with the mother or the baby. Here in Orlando, Florida, where I live, all the hospitals here are great. I think any hospital that I had picked for labor would be a good choice because they're really good, but I decided to choose this specific hospital because in case of any complication, this hospital is the most prepared in the area to deal with it. If I was in another hospital, for example, depending on the sort of complication that arose, they would send me to this hospital that I picked, either by ambulance or even by helicopter in case of, crazy emergencies. So I thought, why not to just go to the finest? And that's what I did. Another reason why I picked this hospital is kind of a little silly, but it is a reason. This hospital is just so beautiful. It does not even look like a hospital. When you look at the hospital from the outside, it has a beautiful tower, and the lobby part of the tower is all made out of glass. So the reception of the hospital is like a glass dome, that the glass walls, they come from the floor all the way to the ceiling. It's really beautiful. You kind of forget you are in a hospital when you are there, because it does look like a 5-star hotel. So that was one of the reasons, a silly one, but one of the reasons why I decided to choose this hospital too. The last few days of my pregnancy were really tough for me. Not because of the pregnancy itself, but because just a few days before my child was born, my little dog Chili passed away. If you want to see more details of what happened to Chili, I have a YouTube video here that is called 10 Things That I Learned with My Dog, that tells with more details what happened to Chili and why he died. But it was really tough on me because, can you imagine, I was pregnant of 9 months, and just a few days before my son was born, my dog passed away. And you may say, well, it's just maybe a pet, it's just a dog. But for me, my dog Chili was the only fur baby I ever had during the last 5 years of my life. So I projected all those maternal instincts that I thought I did not even have into my dog. So it was like losing a child for me. And losing a dear pet is really difficult in any moment of your life, but being pregnant, 9 months pregnant, and having to deal with that was very difficult. When we are pregnant, we are emotionally and even physically more fragile, so it was really, really tough. But thank God, God has given me the strength to carry on and move forward. I will always miss my little dog Chili dearly, but God has helped me a lot to go through this hard season in my life in an easier manner. Now, going back to the hospital, as soon as I got into the hospital, I was fine, without any pain, I was there 9 months pregnant, but I arrived there walking. There was no need for a wheelchair or anything. I was not feeling any contraction pain. So as soon as I got there, they checked me in and they took me to my first room. That, by the way, was the first room of many, because I changed rooms many times during all my stay in the hospital. They hooked me up with IV. They put like a big, kind of like a sticker thing here with an IV entrance here to put, I don't know, the fluids later on in case it was necessary. And they also put kind of like a clip that was a finger monitor to monitor my heartbeats all the time. And later on, they also put an elastic over my belly that had an equipment attached that would monitor my baby heartbeats during the entire time that I was in there. And The room was very nice, really nice. It was a really big room, had a pretty good view too, and I appreciated that they had a bunk bed there for my husband. It did not even look like a bunk bed. It was one of those beds that looked like a piece of furniture that we would pull down and it would become a bed, an extra bed for my husband. It also had a nursing chair, a private bathroom, and with a shower. So it was a very nice room, no complaints at all. And what surprised me was that they decided to check my dilation. For those of you who don't know, the women's dilation goes from 0 to a 10. There's like this scale into centimeters. And just so you know, women usually start to go into active labor and push the baby out as soon as they reach 10 centimeters in their dilation. And the nurse told me that I was already 3 centimeters dilated. Wow! And she even looked at me kind of surprised and asked, "Are you experiencing any sort of pain at all?" And I was like, "No, I'm not." And she was like, "Wow." So that's how it started. I was born and raised in Brazil, and I think it's more of a cultural difference, but in Brazil, women, when they are pregnant, they usually choose to either have a normal birth or a C-section, and lots of Brazilian women, they actually go for the C-section, and that's okay. I'm not here to criticize one thing or the other and tell that one thing was better than the other. I'm just in this video here telling you guys what made more sense for me and try to tell you why I picked one option instead of the other. So my OBG, she was open to both. She knew I was Brazilian, and most Brazilian women actually prefer to have a C-section. So she told me, if you want to have a C-section, that's totally fine. I'll do it, no problem. But I decided to have a natural birth. I decided. We're gonna see in this video that we as mothers, we decide nothing. We have no power over anything. But okay, that's for the next chapter here. So in other words, I decided to have a natural birth because I believe that it was gonna be a lot easier for myself to recover from a natural birth than a C-section. And my family is all in Brazil. So my parents are in Brazil, my brother, everybody's in Brazil. And my husband's family, even though they are in the United States, they do not live very close to us. And my husband's parents, they are already elderly. So I knew since the beginning that we would have no support system to take care of our baby. It would be my husband and I and God. So that's why I thought that it would be a lot easier for me to take care of myself and a newborn baby if I didn't need to go through surgery. So in my mind, I did not want a natural birth at any cost. I wouldn't get frustrated and sad and disappointed if I could not have a natural birth. But at the same time, I really did not want to go through a C-section surgery without any major need. So that's where I stand, just so you know. So now let's talk about my induced labor. There are many different ways that you can induce people to labor, and it's gonna be up to your OBG doctor to pick the best way to induce your labor according, to your medical history and everything else. But the way that my doctor decided to induce my labor was through a medication called misoprostol, that is also known as Cytotec. It's a white, medium-sized pill that is taken orally. So I just took that pill and they put that inside my mouth and told me to let it dissolve by itself. It took it about 20 to 30 minutes for the pill to completely dissolve. And Then the fun started, let's say. I started feeling like some stronger menstrual cramps that very soon started to become a lot stronger, and then the fun really started. Okay, I just need to talk about the food now, because I had never been in a hospital before. I mean, overnight, you know. I had never slept in a hospital. I had never had surgery before in my life. But one thing that I knew is that hospitals are not very well known for having good food. So I was not expecting much from the hospital food. But once the contractions started to get a lot worse, they told me that I would not be allowed to eat later on. So even though I was not very hungry, I decided to have dinner because I did not want to deal with both the contraction pain and the hunger anger, so that would be too much for me. So I decided to coat my stomach with some food to at least don't feel hungry during that time in my life. And the food was surprisingly very good. I decided to order some grilled chicken with some sweet potato fries that came with a side of fruit and also cottage cheese, some grape juice, and a chocolate pudding for dessert. And everything was absolutely delicious. I was really surprised. Just wanted to mention that. So as soon as my contractions started to get a little bit more painful, they decided to move me to what they called the labor room. This labor room was in a separate floor of the hospital, and that was the room where I was supposed to have the baby in the case that I had a normal delivery without any need for surgeries, for example. This new room, it was even larger than the first room, but it had no windows at all. It did not have a bunk bed like the previous bedroom, but it did have a private bathroom too, this time with a tub too, and there was no bunk bed, so all they had was a chair for my husband. It was one of those chairs that was pretty comfortable as far as hospital chairs go, that they would inclinate a little bit so that, you know, my husband could kind of lay down, not completely, but a little bit. And this room was what I would describe as the torture room. And I started to understand why this room was totally disconnected from the other, you know, rooms in a different floor, because I started hearing like the screaming of my neighbors on the right or on the left having babies. I would hear women screaming all the time, and then I would hear babies crying. And I started thinking, wow, I think these are the next chapters for my labor. And I was right, because my contractions started to become more and more painful and more often too. It got to the point that I was having contractions every other minute, and my nurses started to get a little concerned because they told me that according to my dilation at the time, I should be having contractions every 2 or 3 minutes instead, not every minute. So they decided to call my OBG. So the nurses at the hospital called my OBG, and my OBG decided to prescribe a medication to slow down all the contractions. And the result of that was that I pretty much stopped dilating, and I got stuck in a 5-6 centimeter dilation for several hours with absolutely no progress. So the nurses at the hospital decided to call my OBG, and my OBG prescribed a second dosage of that misoprostol cytotec medication that I had already taken before to start the induced labor. So I got a second dose of the same medication to speed up the contractions that they had just slowed down. At this point, my doctor came to the hospital for the first time and decided to break my water, because Up to this point, even though I was feeling a lot of contractions, my water hadn't broken. So she decided to do that manually. And after that, all those contractions that were already pretty bad became a lot worse, really a lot worse. And I still remember that at that point, my OBG looked at me and she said, "You are not gonna get any medal to tolerate, you know, this pain, so get an epidural." And I decided to decline the offer. I was like, no, I don't wanna get an epidural. I want a natural labor with no kind of medication. And I was, you know, still in my mindset of going through all the pain without any sort of medication. Well, my contractions started to come every minute, and each contraction was lasting about 3 minutes each. And at this point, I was already 7 centimeters dilated. And I started to notice that there was something not right. Something was wrong in the room, because up to now, the feeling in the room was kind of calm. The nurses were calm. There was like one nurse at each time with me, and I started to notice that all that equipment that they had wrapped around my belly, monitoring the baby heartbeats, it started to do beep, 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 beep. And I thought, that's not right. And then the nurses started to come in and out of my room. And there was a point that I had like 3 or 4 different nurses in my room instead of only one. And all of them looked a little concerned, even though they were trying to keep me calm. And they started to ask me to change positions. So they asked me to lay on my right side, because I was laying with my belly up like this, and they asked me to, you know, lay on my right side, and I would do that. And a couple of minutes later, they would look at me and say, "Oh, no, the baby doesn't like that," and they would ask me to try my left side instead, and I would lay on my left side. And they would come back and say, "Oh, no, the baby does not like that either." And I would change it to another position. And I kept changing positions over and over and over. And it looked like whatever they were doing, it was not working. And one thing that I knew was that a normal heart rate for a baby was between 110 and 160 beats per minute. And I saw on that monitor that was beside my bed that every single time that I had a contraction, my baby heart rate would drop all the way to 60 beats per minute, instead of being in that range between 110 and 160. So I definitely knew that there was something clearly wrong going on there. Every time that I thought that my labor contractions were already bad enough, they became worse. But as long as I was in pain, I was fine with that. But what started to concern me a lot was when I noticed that my baby was in distress too. Because every single time that I had one of those contractions, and I started to realize that the baby heartbeat would drop, but this time the baby heart rate was not only dropping to 60, but also going up to about 170 and then dropping immediately to 60 after each contraction. And I knew that was absolutely not right. So the nurses decided to call my OBG again. And at this point, I had been in labor contractions and excruciating pain for over 24 hours without sleeping, just with pain and contraction after contraction, really painful. And I decided to go for the epidural anesthesia because I just could not endure that kind of pain any longer. My doctor came and I told my doctor, you know, I can still tolerate this pain if it's just for a few more hours, but I don't want to spend another day here feeling this pain for 24 more hours in order to have my baby. And I asked my OBG if she thought the baby was about to come or not, and she told me it was hard to tell me. It was, you know, hard to answer that question because it could take the baby a couple of hours, you know, or maybe another day to come. And I did not want to take any chance at that point. I was just done with pain, and I just changed my mind and decided to go for the epidural. So they told me that there were 2 different kinds of epidural anesthesias available, and they allowed me to pick the one that I preferred. The first epidural was what they would call the walking epidural, that I was allowed to walk, and the second one was one epidural that would leave me in bed. So I decided to go for the walking epidural. One thing that I really appreciated was that as soon as I decided that I wanted to go for the epidural, I kind of lost track of time because of the pain, but in my mind it took just a few minutes for the anesthesiology doctor to arrive. And as soon as he arrived, he was a really funny guy. I don't think I can even say the things that he told me here in this channel, but I could not even laugh with these jokes because I was in so much pain that I started to ask myself how my neighbors, you know, on right and left could even scream of labor pain, because I was in so much pain that he would ask me questions and I would kind of nod with my head, yes and no, and that was all I was able to do because I could not even talk because of all the pain that I was feeling. They asked me to sit on my bed to have the epidural done and to curve my back in a C shape like this. So I just kind of bended my head. A nurse was in front of me reminding me that it was really important not to move while he was doing the epidural. And the doctor, the anesthesiologist, he said, now you're gonna feel a little shock on your right leg. And I saw that my right leg just kind of stood up and I was not making it move, it just went by itself. And then he said, now you're gonna feel the same thing on your left leg instead. And I felt my left leg going up. And that was the best thing for me because all that excruciating pain just disappeared like magic. So they gave me a little equipment that I remember had a green button on it and just told me to just press that button once every time I felt any sort of pain, and that was it. So my doctor arrived at the hospital, and even though I was not feeling any pain anymore, the contractions were still there present, and after every single contraction, my baby's heartbeat was really irregular. So my doctor explained to me that my baby was in distress and she was declaring an emergency C-section. So that was it. They started to prepare me and go there to prepare the room for the C-section, and they started to use some wipes and wipe around all my arms and legs and everything, and putting that little cap on my hair, and I changed it to another gown because I was wearing a slip that I brought, you know, from home up to this point. So they put me in that hospital gown to go to the surgery room. How did I feel? At first, I can tell you that my feeling was just frustration, because after all, I had been in the hospital feeling excruciating labor pains for over 24 hours already. And I don't know exactly how was my dilation at that point, but the last time they had checked me for dilation, I was already 7 centimeters dilated, and that was before I took the epidural. So I thought I was probably already pretty close to 10 centimeters dilated because several hours had already passed. So I thought, I came all the way to this point just to have a C-section? Only if I had a crystal ball and I knew what was going to happen, I would just have scheduled a C-section instead, arrived at the hospital without feeling a single labor contraction for a scheduled C-section, and had my baby with absolutely no pain at all. But do I have a crystal ball? Am I the one in charge to know how my baby is gonna enter this world? No. So I think that for me, maybe that was just one of the first lessons in motherhood, that we plan absolutely nothing and we can't control our children or the future, what's going on, and that God's plans are bigger than our plans. And sometimes we are not going to fully understand what's going on, but I believe we need to put our life in God's hands and trust. And that's what I did. I trusted not only God, but also the whole medical staff. I knew I was in a very good hospital with very competent doctors. So I finally decided to relax and let life run its course, I guess. Because in the end, I never truly wanted a natural labor at any cost or a C-section without any need, as I told you before. And I was absolutely sure that at that point I had done everything I possibly could to try to make a natural birth happen, but unfortunately it didn't. And that's okay. So at first I got really frustrated and even a little sad, but after all I thought, you know what, my life is in God's hands and I trust Him, so I know everything will be okay. So I was fine. So they took me to the surgery room. It was another room now. And my husband was there with me during the entire time of the surgery. I was awake and I had my OBG doctor there. There was another doctor that I didn't know and several other staff members in the room too. And I was there, I was laying on the bed. I had my arms wide open like this while I was laying down, and they had like several equipments hooked up to both of my arms. And at one point I remember that my doctors were just talking, you know, the doctors were just talking to each other during the entire surgery, but I heard one of the doctors saying, the shoulder, and I thought, if they're talking about the shoulder, I'm sure the baby will be out here soon. I had a curtain in front of me, so I could not see anything, but I could see my husband's eyes that he was a little concerned in several moments. He was like, But I couldn't see anything and I was not feeling pain, so I was calm and I was fine. I asked my doctor if she could lower the curtain, you know, so that I could see the surgery. I actually wanted to see that. And she was like, no, you don't want to see that. we don't allow it anyway, you know. So, but when the baby's born, we are going to lower the curtain so that you can see him. So, okay, I was fine. And I felt a little bit of pressure and movement in my belly, not pain at all. And then I saw my doctor lowering down the curtain and my baby boy coming up. And my baby boy was born with his eyes wide open in a very bright hospital room. What was quite surprising for me, I thought he was going to be born with his eyes closed and it would take, you know, a few hours at least for me to be able to even see his eyes. But no, even though the lights in that room were white and super bright, he had his eyes wide open the entire time. And even though he was not crying, I was not concerned at all because I could see his little eyes kind of moving, like, what is that, right and left? And I could see the expression in my doctor's face. Even though she was wearing a mask, I could see her eyes kind of smiling, you know, and she was holding the baby. And that was it. So they allowed my husband to cut the umbilical cord. That was really nice. I asked the doctors if he was allowed to do that. So they took my baby to the back of the room, and my husband followed the baby. And then I heard the baby crying. And then they brought the baby to me and put the baby right on my chest. And I tried to focus on the baby's face. My boy was a little pink when he was born, but super cute. My whole C-section surgery was a very fast surgery without absolutely no complications. I think the whole surgery was about 30 minutes. And I remember that as soon as they brought my son to me and put him on my chest, my first words to him were, "Nice to meet you. I'm your mama. I have no idea what I'm gonna do with you, but we are gonna learn it together, and you're going to teach me how to be a mama." The curious thing for me is that before having a child, I talked to several people among friends and family who are parents and had a child, and every single one of them described that first moment, that when they meet their baby born, as pretty much the same. They said you're gonna feel that, oh, that unconditional love wave of, I love this baby more than anything else in the world, like love, pure love at first sight. And I wanted to feel that, and I was sure I was also gonna feel that way, but the truth is I didn't. And I'm not here like criticizing anyone who feels that way. I'm telling you that I actually wanted to be one of those people who felt that way too, and I was surprised when I did not. What I felt instead of love at first sight, was just a huge feeling of relief for knowing that my son was okay, especially after the heart rate going up and down for several hours after each contraction. So just to see that he was fine and he was healthy, for me, gave me a huge sense of relief. Another thing that I felt was a very strong sense of responsibility for this life that was there in front of me now. So I felt that, but I didn't feel love, just that pure, unconditional, crazy love. I didn't feel that. And to be honest with you, it took me several months to feel, that way. Because for me, love towards my son was and still is a construction. Every single month that passes by, every single day, every single hour that passes by, I love him even deeper. But it was not something that happened, boom, immediately at the first time I saw him. And I was really surprised with that. I just want to make something clear here, that now after several months that I have my baby, I do feel that crazy unconditional love. It's finally here, but to be honest with you, it did take a few months. So after my C-section surgery, they sent me to another room that was an adjacent room to the surgery room, that was not a private room like all the other rooms that I had experienced in the hospital up to now, even though I did not see anybody else there at the time while I was still there, but they had curtains like on the right and left side. It was a very narrow and small room. It had like a bed, just a little chair, and they gave me a little cup with ice to kind of chew on the ice a little bit. And then they sent me to, I spent about 1 hour or so in this post-surgery room. And then they sent me to what they call the recovery room, which is the room where I stayed until I was released from the hospital. So at the recovery room, I had both my husband and my baby there with me the entire time. And I opted to not receive any visitors in my room while I was at the hospital because I wanted to be able to rest a little bit better. But even doing that, I need to tell you that it was impossible to rest because we had medical staff coming in and out of the room pretty much all the time just to do exams with my baby and with me. So the nurses were coming to take my blood pressure. I don't know, it looked like it was like an every hour thing. And there was a lot of tests to be done with my son too. There was like his feet test and ear test and vision test. And there was a bunch of tests and pediatricians coming and going. So I could not even rest. I remember there was a point that my husband and I talked to one of the nurses asking the staff to be a little less invasive, let's say, so that we could sleep and rest a little better. And they explained to us that even that floor where they put me was a separated floor where they put all the high risk pregnancies, because my pregnancy in theory, even though there was absolutely no complication, was still a high risk pregnancy like I explained to you guys. So let's say we got a lot extra attention from the staff. And I'm not complaining, you know, it's not a complaint because I think the whole staff there was absolutely amazing. All the nurses and doctors, every single person that I interacted in the hospital was just great professionals and even kind and warm, what in my experience in dealing with healthcare providers in general has been a pretty rare circumstance. So they were just amazing, but I just could not rest while I was there. And it was not even because of my baby, because my newborn baby, he was not even crying that much. He was still calm, you know, at that point. But the staff in and out all the time, I just couldn't sleep. Another difficult moment that I can recall right now was after my son was born, and I remember that he was hungry and I did not have any milk, and I started to feel so desperate that I had like a meltdown and I started to cry. And one of the nurses came over and talked to me and calmed me down, and they called a lactation consultant to come over my room and also talk to me. And the lactation consultant said, it's totally normal. Your milk supply is just gonna start to drop. Your milk is gonna start to drop 2 or 3 days after, you know, labor, and it's totally normal that you don't have any milk right now, and you just give formula to your son, you know. But I don't know what went through my mind. In my mind, it was like, my son is here, he's hungry, I should be breastfeeding him, and I don't have any milk. And I started to be so desperate. And it's kind of weird now to even think about that, because now I'm like, several months passed by and I was like, now if something like that happened, I would never even cry because of something that little. But at that moment, I think it was a combination of all those crazy hormones from pregnancy and labor combined and mixed it up with the sleep deprivation that caused the kind of that overreaction on my end that now I find even funny. I'm like, what is, it's not a big deal, you know, if I don't have any milk, just give it formula. My son is not going to starve to death, and that's it, simple like that. So I spent a total of 3 days at the hospital since I arrived at the hospital until I was released, and that was it. I wish I had recorded this video a few months ago instead of now, but life is a little crazy right now. I'm a first-time mom. My husband is a first-time dad too. So motherhood has been a little bit challenging, even though it has been totally amazing and wonderful. I do love my son to pieces, but it's not very easy without a support system sometimes too, like I told you, because I don't have any family close by, so we are doing everything ourselves. I'm really thankful that I have my husband here with me by my side. He has been my rock during this time, and I just love him even further now. So I just wanted to record this video not only to share with you, but also as something for myself to go back a few years, you know, in the future, or even my son to watch this video. My husband and I, we are trying to raise my son bilingual. I speak Portuguese with my son, my husband speaks English. Let's see how it's gonna turn out. I'll tell you in the future. So thank you so much for watching this video. Please remember to click on the like and also subscribe to the channel if you see more videos here that you like. Leave me your comments here. How was your labor experience? Did you have a natural labor? Did you have a C-section? Did your water break naturally? Did your doctor break your water? How was it? I'm curious to hear about your experience too. So check out my other videos, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!